energy and the maritime sectors. Of course, before that, just to make you a little bit more acquainted with myself, I was born in Mombasa, and I went to Ziwani Primary School, for those who know it. I later on did my secondary schooling in Technical High School. I understand this has been renamed now to Kenya Coast National Polytechnic. I went to sea on general cargo vessels as a deck cadet. Later on, I went offshore as well on supply boats around 1983. After doing my sea time and various stints at college, I managed to get my Master Mariner certificate from Cardiff in the United Kingdom. My first command was on gas tankers back in 1992, and I worked there for a while. Then my company at that time, which was Mice Company Limited from London, had a project in the offshore Congo. So I went back actually to the energy side of things. We converted one of a very large gas carrier to become one of the first floating gas storage and offloading unit. There, after the installation of the facility itself, offshore Congo, we started producing oil and gas from there. My company saw it fit that they believed that I was management material, and they called me back into the office to become their safety and quality manager. And then I went on to become the deputy operations manager for Mice Company in London. A few years later, I was practically actually headhunted to come to the state of Qatar. And I came as a harbor master for the port of Mesaid. This is a very large industrial port in the south of the country, where they have a large refinery. So I was involved in shipping again from an onshore perspective, sort of helping out and exporting fertilizers, refined products, and there's also a steel and aluminum factory there. After that, the country was around the third largest exporter of LNG. In 2004, they were planning actually to increase the LNG production to become #1 in the world. The main facilities for LNG production and export are in Ras Laffan, which is again north of the country. I was then moved to Ras Laffan port from Mesaid, now as port manager for the Ras Laffan port. We completed the expansion. The port was actually expanded 8 times the size with a lot more new berths. It is now the largest LNG producing export terminal on the globe. And at the same time, within the last 2 years, the management has decided that we need to expand a little bit more. So we're launching new projects now that will take us to export from 77 million tons that we do at the moment up to 126 million tons by 2027. So I'm very well versed with LNG. So the contents of my presentation today will look at various issues, starting with global warming. And we've been hearing this in our conversations now for quite some time. We've also been feeling some of those effects from it. But what does it mean? In short, these are temperature rises that are induced because we as humans are doing something on this globe, which is having a lot of impact on the weather patterns. And the main source or the main cause of this global warming, as the scientists are telling us, is greenhouse gas emissions affecting the atmosphere around the Earth. These greenhouse emissions consist of carbon dioxide and methane. As you can see the formula, there's a carbon and oxygen, 2 oxygen molecules for carbon dioxide, and methane is a carbon and 4 hydrogen molecules. And this happens when we burn fossil fuels. We burn fossil fuels for energy generation. And when we are doing production of different manufacturing, even agriculture has a an impact on creating more CO2 in the system. Another main cause, obviously, is transportation, because as human beings, we move from one place to another. So every form of transportation that we use nowadays, whether it's on land with cars, with lorries, we use hydrocarbon fuel. On ships, we do the same. And after a long time, the world understood that this was a problem, and there was a lot of arguments on how could we actually address them. Finally, in 2015, in one of our international meeting called the Conference of Parties, there was an agreement in Paris in 2015 that we needed to address these climate change issues. And some commitments were made to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and also to limit the temperature increases to below 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. If you look where these greenhouse emissions are coming from by sectors, first, of course, is industry. And industry, a big part of it is energy generation. I'll talk a little bit more about it in my next slide. But also land use. When we clear a lot of land, when trees are cut down or burnt, for agriculture, we increase those emissions. Buildings, the transport, and other energy as well. Humans need energy to grow. And this, I can say, when Almighty God decreed for mankind to live on this planet, He also gifted us air, water, and food, so we have life. But He also gifted us a lot of sources of energy so that humanity can thrive. It's said about 1 million years ago, so early human somehow found a way of making and controlling fire. And when they did this, it allowed them first to cook their food, which made it more edible. It provided them lighting in their dwellings. It provided heat when it was cold. Fire allowed them to make tools from different metals. Now, this ability to capture and use energy had a massive impact on our evolution. Today, we know this energy is not fire anymore. Sometimes we still use it, but mostly electricity, because all these things that cooking, whether it's lighting, whether heating or cooling, and making things, we need electricity. Now, access to affordable electricity is the one which makes us progress forward. And electricity now plays a very essential role in both our economic and social development. Today, as we sit here, I'm talking to you from the state of Qatar. A lot of you are sitting back home in Kenya, and some, I believe, in other places on the globe. We are communicating, we are sharing through this medium of the internet, through our phones, through our computers. And this could not have been possible if we didn't have electricity. So electricity is very important in having higher living standards. It was recognized under the UN that sustainable development goals, a few of them were defined, and this is the world that all nations want to live, and all nations have committed to. 17 of these were defined. I'll just mention some of them, and you can see that these are very, very important to the human kind. One of the first ones is obviously no poverty. Another one is zero hunger. Another more important one is good health and well-being. We have quality education. We have seawater and sanitation. We have affordable, clean energy. All of them, if you look at them, cannot be possible without affordable electricity. Now, in the last centuries, 19th and 20th centuries, there was a lot of transformation. And a lot of it was driven by having energy through using coal for steam engines and making electricity, and oil for transportation. And this made a lot of countries, the north of part of the globe, change their lifestyle and change even their outlook. They travel far and wide looking for materials. They even came to our countries because they had that ability to do that because of these fuels. Later on, we have been looking at hydro as part of the energy mix, geothermal, which is very widely used in Kenya. Wind is growing a lot in many northern part of the world. However, these are not available everywhere. Not every place has sustained winds that you can actually generate electricity at reliable rate. We all know that energy demand is going to grow because population is growing. We are living much longer now in this world. As an example, when I can say when I came to the state of Qatar, just around 20 years ago, the total population was around 700,000. Now we have reached about 2.5 million. And all these people require obviously food, they require housing, they require transport, and they require everything as mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals under the UN Charter. And this could not have been possible. This state could not have done it if they didn't have the number one, the access to the fuel that I was talking about, which gave them the growth and the development to welcome everyone. We see in the future that solar, batteries, and renewables will become some of the important energy mix. The challenge is that, as I said, it's not available everywhere. There are reliability issues because not every day the sun shines. Not every day that you have enough rain or a river actually to have hydroelectricity. However, now that we have recognized that some of these fossil fuels cause a problem to our globe, we need to have a transition from the current fuels to low carbon or zero carbon fuels. However, we know if we look at the alternatives as they are now, how are we going to find fuel that support heavy industries and transportation? Because the ones we have now cannot do it the same way that the fossil fuels can. We need to find those short to medium term solutions, having some sort of fuels that are transition towards that greener technology. We're waiting for technology to catch up so that it can give us those solutions. The long-term solutions obviously is a replacement of the fossil fuels. However, I think everyone agrees that our dependency on fossil fuels will really remain beyond the present century. Then comes the question, so if we're still going to be using fossil fuels, some kind, which one will it be? This is now the question on today's topic. When we refer to cold energy, what is it? In short, everyone says it's LNG, but what is LNG? Just to give you some of the highlights of LNG, first is fossil fuel. It's extracted from oil and gas production processes. Once it's purified, you need to remove some of the impurities and you cool it down to minus 163 degrees Celsius, it becomes a liquid and named as liquefied natural gas. That's why we call it cold energy. It's very cold at minus 163, but it's actually a very potent energy source. And currently, this is the cleanest fossil fuel that is widely available. Why do we say it's clean? And we actually pride ourselves, actually, that is a clean energy. So first, from an energy density perspective, it is only second to hydrogen. When you measure it, how many joules are there per kilogram, it hits a very high number. Secondly, it releases less CO2 than coal. In fact, only half the amount of CO2 is released. I mean, half amount of carbon dioxide is released from LNG compared to coal, and 30% less than the fuel oil. When we look at nitrox and sulfur oxides, these are dramatically reduced. These emissions actually are a different problem we had before of acid rain, because when these emissions go up there, and then when you have rain, they mix together and they come down as acid, and they affect our lives, they affect our crops. Now, when you burn LNG, it does not emit any soot because the carbon is, mostly burnt up. There's no dust, there's no fumes. And that's why it is one of the cleanest fossil fuel available today. So the question and answer was whether LNG was the fix that we needed if we were to move from the other dirty fuels. It's very clear that LNG is not the final solution. There is definitely no one-size-fits-all solution in terms of energy. Every location, every country will have to find what is the solution for them as an energy mix. They have to see what they have available in their own locations, whether it's hydro, whether it's wind, and then to use with hydrocarbons and renewables and others. But LNG, we see it as the bridge to those future renewables and biofuels. It is also an ideal transition fuel so that our commitments to climate change goals can be met, and we keep the emissions down, and we keep the temperatures to the numbers that we've committed to. On the other hand as well, LNG is able to achieve a very, very good balance when it comes to sustainable development. From the environmental perspective, it has much lower CO2 emissions compared to the coal or oil. The air pollution is negligible and no particles during combustion. From the economical perspective, natural gas is really in abundance everywhere. You keep hearing every year more and more countries are finding gas, and they're able either to exploit it or to export it. As I mentioned earlier on during the program, that the state of Qatar is going to expand its export of LNG in the 5 years to come. Another part of it is that it is a very energy efficient fuel, because the gas technology are very, very mature compared with others. LNG is very flexible. When I say flexible, of course, you can transport it through pipelines, but more importantly, when you cool it and put it on a ship, you can take it almost to anywhere in the world where a ship can be berthed. And again, from a price perspective, it is very competitively priced against other fuels. As a society, it improves that accessibility and affordability of energy that we ask for. It provides us energy security so that we can ensure that there will always be electricity to power our houses, for us to charge our phones, to run the TVs that we need, because the society now needs that. LNG is also very useful in terms of different aspects of whether it's energy, industry, or transport. It does and provide good support to any local activities. I'll come to the other aspect now when it comes to the transportation sector, because in the end, we are the maritime practitioners. So we have to look at this whole question about GHG against the maritime industry. I must say that, we, the shipping community, are really in the storm center of these emissions, because we, contribute and we also partake in both its exploration and production. A lot of new fields appear to be located in ocean areas. We know even now in Kenya, there's all these conflicts with our neighbors because of the borders. We believe there are oil and gas fields there. And so seafarers, as the shipping fraternity, are employed in these crafts that go out there and help the exploration and production. And we are part of that, and we contribute to that production of fossil fuels. Shipping is known to be the largest transport of goods in the world, because most of the world is covered by water. So every product that you can think of is somehow or one day shipped by sea. If you look at coal and oil, these are some of the largest ships sailing around today carrying coal and oil. You have the VLCCs, the very large crude carriers carrying crude oil and other products. You have the large bulk carriers, either China-Max or Vale-Max, carrying coal and steel. And these ships represent a significant amount of the global shipping fleet. Again, mariners, from many countries, especially developing ones, are the preferred crew on these vessels. On a third aspect, we in the shipping community are users of fossil fuels during the shipping transport. The fuel that's used on ships, for those of my engineer colleagues who are here, will tell you some of the worst heavy oil and CO2 emission discharges. The heavy fuel oil demand from on a global level, half of it goes towards ship bunkers. Recently, there was an implementation of low sulfur fuel, which was one of the small steps towards cleaning up ship emissions. Even for ourselves who are working in the port, we are also consumers of energy and emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. Ports that have container cranes require a lot of electrical power to run the STS cranes. We have RTGs, we have trailers, other land transport, trucks to take the containers to and from. They are large consumers of fossil fuels, and they pollute all along the roads they go to. We have our port craft, the tugs, the mooring boats, even pilot launches. They contribute to local air pollution. So we can say that the transportation activities, especially on the marine side, we're significant energy consumers, while we're providing this mobility to either freight or passengers. And we account actually to 25% of world energy use. And in the end, this is not going to stop in terms of transportation will have to carry on if we are going to be developing further. So how are we going to find a solution towards that? As I mentioned at the beginning, the agreement, the Paris Agreement was in 2015. When they agreed at that time, they excluded two significant actual transportation modes, one being the water mode. They left that to IMO to resolve it, and the other one being air transport was left to ICAO to solve. IMO took about 3 years to come up with an initial strategy how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We set a series of milestones how to reduce it. And as I mentioned earlier, last year in 2020, the low sulfur mandate came in, and it made that vessels must reduce the sulfur content down to 0.5%, and that was effective in 1st January 2020. Prior to that, we had oil bunker at 5% or 3.5%, different places. Now the ships either have an option to have low sulfur fuel oil or put scrubber units so that they do not emit sulfur oxides into the atmosphere. Or other options is to actually convert the engine to other type of fuel. And a lot of them actually have been converted to LNG burning. We have another deadline coming up in 2023, which will require some measures to reduce the emissions again by 2030, and an opportunity as well to revise the initial strategy. This is a 5-year anniversary from the 2018. It's the same what the discussions that are going now in the COP 26 being held in Glasgow, which is the 5-year anniversary of the initial one of 2015. It was supposed to be last year, but because of COVID, it was postponed to this year. So after 5 years, countries and organizations are going to be asked what is their commitments towards this. So 2030 is a very important deadline, because at that point, the average reduction should be 40% compared to the 2008 levels. And companies have to find ways and means of doing that, changing the fuels, improving the energy consumption, or energy efficiency of the engines, and other means. So by 2050, one of the long-term reduction is 50%, and is expected that that may require 85% reduction per ship. There is a vision of zero emissions from shipping in this century, but really that will depend on whether the alternative fuel are available and what the infrastructure is there for them. So when you look at alternative fuels, there are quite a number, in the labs now. You're looking at different routes. Some of the ones which are being seriously discussed besides LNG are the hydrogen route. Where will you get the hydrogen? One of the routes, of course, is taking water. Water is H2O, as we all know, and somehow having hydrolysis and taking out the oxygen and just leaving the hydrogen. I think in my earlier slide, you saw how hydrogen had so much energy intensity. So that's believed to would be a good fuel if we're able to isolate the hydrogen molecule. But again, you need power, you need energy actually to do that. You will now keep hearing about blue hydrogen and green hydrogen and gray hydrogen, because it depends what was the origin of that hydrogen molecule, and also how you actually divided that molecule. You also have a hydrocarbon route to take that hydrogen molecule. I think, again, in my earlier slide, you saw that methane was a CH4. So if you can break down this molecule and remove the carbon and just have the H4, which is a hydrogen, you will then be able to actually have a hydrogen fuel. Again, they will be given different labels depending how they were obtained. Another big contender is ammonia. Ammonia is expected to become as big as LNG one day. And a lot of work is going on to that. But again, ammonia, which is nitrogen and three molecules of hydrogen, comes normally in oil and gas processes. So there are a lot of challenges in finding what will be the optimum fuel for transportation. And here I'm talking specifically just about marine transportation. Of course, there are different, let's say, solutions for land transportation and for rail transportation. Mainly, people they're looking at electricity again. Again, how will you actually generate that electricity to power the trains? So, as I say, going back to the fuel for shipping, LNG has been given a real boost after the low sulfur mandate, because when shipping saw they could not meet the requirements, they looked at changing in the engines of the ship. So LNG fuel vessels are now, more and more of them are coming on stream. Because LNG itself is available and affordable, the technology is mature. What you needed is actually getting ship officers and crew training how to do bunker and actually use those engines. Manufacturers are really stepping up to the challenge to develop LNG engines. We have a lot of dual fuel engines where they're running both LNG and other type of fuels. You have hybrid propulsion, meaning we have a battery and maybe LNG. And we see that the first high uptake is passenger ferries. The passenger ferries, because they are work in populated areas, and they have wanted to show how green they are. Second are container vessels and cruise vessels. This adoption of LNG fuel and more efficient engine is going faster and faster, and we believe this is going to be a very fast train, and other fuels will not be able to catch up. We also have a number of other smaller craft, such as offshore support vessels and tugs that are successfully working under LNG power. The bunkering infrastructure is growing. If you look at Europe, a lot of places now you can actually bunker LNG. In the Far East, the same is happening, especially on those routes that are used by the container. Singapore is taking a very, very fast action to become one of the center for LNG bunkering. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that happening on the African continent itself, which is quite a shame. Now, the vision, of course, from my IMO is a reduction of greenhouse gases. If you look at it, the first, this is one of the models which is there, is that low sulfur will decrease quite quickly, and LNG will increase very, very quickly as a marine fuel. We see the HFO, the heavy fuel oil with the scrubber, is not changing very much, but more likely these vessels will be scrapped at the end of their service life. Ammonia, as I mentioned, is becoming a very strong contender, but all the models and all the forecasts are saying that LNG will dominate this fuel mix. This is quite actually similar to power generation sectors as well. I'd now like to come to the end of today's presentation and with some takeaways. From the energy side, a lot of transformation, big ones, are required if we're going to meet the Paris targets. Number one is the phase out of coal. Very, very challenging to some countries, especially like China, India, Australia. Not only are they have a lot of reserves of coal, but they also use that mainly for their power generation. In China, some of the reports I read, they are opening up 2 coal power plants per week, because of the amount of manufacturing they have. Everything you look at today, you'll find is made in China. And it doesn't matter whether it was designed in Europe or US, it's usually made in China. India is also coming up very, very fast in that, again, using coal. So how are you going to tell these countries to stop actually using coal as a power generator? The second part of the energy sector, there's a lot of investments will be required in research and development, so for engines and renewables and the hydrogen fuels that I mentioned before. What I can say that the LNG is going to be playing a key role to support CO2 emissions. Just by switching, from polluting or coal to LNG, you can reduce the emissions by half. We saw recently both the United Kingdom and the US, for different reasons, they switched to LNG power, and their numbers change drastically. You'll also still need LNG to complement the renewables, because they are not very reliable in some cases because of the technology at the moment. And as I said, if it's solar, then if we have no sunshine, then we don't have power. If it's hydro and the rains fail, then you have no hydro. So you will still need to have that, let's say, extra reserve, maybe through LNG, to keep the power going. Another one is that LNG gives you that balance. We have commitments that we're going to make about climate change, but we also want social and economical progress. So LNG gives us that solution. yes, we have challenges. One of the top one is the natural gas policies of countries. As I mentioned before, even LNG will maybe classed as gray, blue, or green, depending whether you use carbon capture and storage technology, how did you produce it, were you taking care of methane slip, and all these things. We have geopolitical issues. Many countries talk about net zero, but how are you measuring that? Are you just going to measure it based on what you produce or what you use? And these numberings are not universal and very, very problematic. Another challenge, how are you going to tell the less developed nations not to advance their growth by using less electricity? This is, seems to be inhuman in some ways, because it means those countries that have advanced can stay ahead, and those who want to advance cannot. We also need a sizable investment in the LNG infrastructure if LNG really is going to be the transition fuel and the part of the future fuel. We have concerns about some of the methane emissions. I think in the present COP26, some commitments have been made by different countries to cut these ones down. You have issues about, climate, let's say, protecting the climate groups. Sometimes they distort facts. You have some of their campaigns and they say you should not invest any more in oil and gas. But we said, and it's obvious that some sort of fossil fuels are always going to be there. Because we cannot just leave all that coal in the ground. We can't leave that oil and gas lie in the ground. And if we do now, and we haven't got a substitute for what we need, it means whatever little is there will become less as the population grows, meaning there will be an increase in price, and that is not good for anyone. So for me, actually, LNG is still the most affordable, reliable, flexible, while still being environmentally friendly. It will meet the need of those countries who are energy poor. We say energy poor. It's not because they don't have the know-how. It's not because they don't have the labor. They have all that, but they don't have enough energy to actually move ahead. And LNG will help to reduce those emissions as well. Just before the Beijing Olympics, China changed a lot of their coal-powered generators into LNG, and there was a major improvement in the air quality. So LNG supports power generation, transportation, and development. I think one important thing is that there's a mindset that fossil fuels are evil and renewables are the good ones, and there is us and them. This is not really helpful at all. We need to find that balance so that as we go ahead, we understand the challenges of fossil fuels. How can we phase them out? But this has to be done together. And I hope the meeting that is happening in Glasgow now will provide some solutions and some commitments from different governments to make this happen. I'd really like to thank everyone again for listening to me. And I would like to hand back to the President, Captain Suleiman, to moderate further on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Captain Faisal, for that very enlightening presentation. And I was myself spellbound, taking notes, drinking into all that new information, and quite a very interesting topic and quite unique compared to other series of the previous webinars that we have held in this forum. So thank you so much again, and I wish to appreciate the presence of government officers here with us this afternoon. public and private sector maritime practitioners that have joined us this afternoon. And again, we are streaming live on the YouTube. And I'd like as well to appreciate those that are following us on YouTube on our live streaming on that platform as well. So I appreciate again the presence of Captain Hamisi, Senior Fellow of the MPK, who's joined us this afternoon. Karibu sana, Captain. And I would now like to usher in the second part of this webinar, which is a question and answer session. Now, I understand that we allowed our panelist, our presenter this afternoon, to take a bit more time, particularly because we did not want to disturb the flow. The presentation was quite captivating, and we took a decision to allow Captain Faisal a bit more latitude of time to finish his presentation. So we'll move on now to the second segment of this webinar. And I would like to invite questions from participants, written questions that can be posted using the icon at the bottom of the screen, the Q&A icon. And for those that would want to voice the questions, perhaps raise verbal questions, that can be done through the icon, the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, and I will be able to give them an opportunity to address, to raise their questions directly, verbally, to Captain Faisal. Perhaps I'll start with a question of my own, and Captain Faisal, I noted in your last slide particularly, and you pointed out to the concerns with regards to investment required for LNG infrastructure. Africa is much behind, as you rightfully pointed out, and I would wonder what would be the forces in play that would perhaps would be the key drivers globally that would then push African countries towards making this investment. And do you foresee these investments to be done by governments, or would then the private sector be urged to invest in this infrastructure in Africa? So which direction would you foresee Africa taking with regards to LNG infrastructure? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Suleiman. I must say, I mean, people may be not aware, Nigeria is one of a very large LNG exporter on that side of the world. A lot of countries in West Africa as well are looking at that infrastructure, but they have focus on exporting it rather than usage themselves. Now, on the East African coast, we know there's a lot of LNG, especially starting from Mozambique. Mozambique is probably 2 years behind because of all the instability in that area. Even recently, when I think it was Total had to move out of the area, followed by Tanzania. Tanzania in Ruvuma Basin, a lot of gas. Some of it is already in use in their own power. I must say as well, is some of the thing that was talked about some time ago, the Dongo Kundu area, there was going to be a power plant there. But this has gone quiet again. But if just reimagine if you actually put, let's say, a gas power plant in Dongo Kundu area, you don't need to build a lot of infrastructure, let's say for LNG export. You could convert one of the tankers known as a floating storage and regasification unit and actually park it around Kipevu area to supply that. You will then do quite a number of things. Number one, you'll be able to supply that gas to the power plant. Number two, you can provide the bunkering infrastructure because just the smaller vessels. As I said, a lot of container vessels are going to convert to LNG, and we have a port, Mombasa port, growing and accommodating large vessels. We don't have an LNG bunkering facility on the whole coast. You know, if you look from Cape Town all the way up to Aden or even Fujairah or maybe Salalah, that will really make a big difference, let's say to Mombasa and Kenya in particular. The same gas that will come there could be used as a CNG, which is used on buses. You know, there's a talk of BRT system, and you know, you could run those BRT system on CNG. So there's a lot of opportunities, but what it needs is that combined force and also combined agreement that this is the way we're going to go. And as you mentioned, it's not only the private sector or the government to do it singly. It needs both these parties to look at it. The government needs to put in the right policies and to encourage the private sector then to invest in it. And it will make a big difference overall. We have built a very large port in Lamu, going to get the very, very large ships. Again, if it's the same container ships, they're more likely to be running on LNG, and we don't have the infrastructure to bunker them. So here I'm just sort of like giving, something. You can see the opportunities which are there. You know, we look at challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities are there for East Africa to become one of the forefront in this. And it doesn't matter that we don't have LNG there. I mean, Singapore doesn't have anything, you know, but they are the center of a lot of things, you know, including shipping. Yeah. Thank you.
It is interesting again, Captain Faisal, as we were just trying to search for any government policy on LNG in Kenya, and the closest we came to any public sector policy on LNG was a document, I think, done by the National Power Generating Company, KenGen. And I think there is something to the effect that they will be committing to much more LNG-based power generation in the future, perhaps increasing the percentage of power generation based on LNG source. So we are a bit behind, as rightfully put, but hopefully the government is taking notice, and the private sector is taking notice as well to developments around the world. I'll move on to give an opportunity to our participants to post their questions or ask their questions. And we have a question here posted by Issa Kibwana, who's making I believe this is a comment, and the end of it is a question. And the comment or concern being that, is there any possibility that the use of LNG would be compulsory for vessels in the future?
Shipping transport is, it's a private business. I don't believe anything like that could be made compulsory for all shipping. And as mentioned, a lot of other technologies are being looked at the moment. Very much so, I think hybrid propulsion is a big one, and dual fuel. The dual fuel usually is because, in certain jurisdictions, there'll be more strict requirements for, emissions. Therefore, the vessel may burn a slightly higher pollutant fuel when outside those jurisdiction, and then maybe LNG within the strict jurisdiction. So those technologies are there, and in the end, these are businesses. It has to balance because that cost in the end will go to the consumer. The cost of the fuel, if it's very high, will end up as part of the freight cost, and it will be part of the item cost itself. So overall, I believe we look at the commitments that are being made in terms of emissions and what is allowed, and then compliance. We as ports will follow and make sure the ships comply. And that is the world. But there will not be, and I don't expect it to be, that there will be that you must use a particular fuel.
Well, thank you very much, Captain Faisal. And I think what I would want perhaps you to expound about is what would be the overall effect of Africa being left behind in this transition to cleaner fuels, and LNG being the cleanest fossil fuel of them all, and rightfully, as you put it, perhaps the best option for the world right now in that transition towards perhaps cleaner energy sources in the future. What would be the net effect of Africa being left behind? And in this context, I would want to look at a scenario where the number of LNG ships across the world increases, and owing to the cost of LNG being lower than the other fuels, so freight rates being lower in other parts of the world owing to the use of LNG, and Africa being left behind. So what would be the net effect and the types of ships as well, which by then would be plying the routes in other parts of the world, but not being able to come to Africa owing to the lack of LNG infrastructure. So what do you see would be the net effect to trade in Africa owing to that scenario? Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. I mean, I see the challenges we have there because we always say it's a chicken and egg, what comes first? Should we have the infrastructure, or we'll get the business first in place? But I think Africa was left behind when it started with the energy. You know, we all remember the so-called tiger economies of East Asia, you know, the Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, you know, they got on the bandwagon of energy, and they had the labor, very, very similar what Africa has as well. But they were able to get that and, you know, upgrade their transportation system, and are able to really jump in big leaps to a very, very different level as well. We have still not made that transition, you know, in Africa. That's one challenge. Secondly, you know, in this case, you know, whereby shipping, because sea transport is one of the key factors in any economy in the world. You know, you can safely say that, you know, 80% of any goods that are being sold anywhere in the world, somehow or another, they have gone over the sea, whether it's a raw material or is the finished material. So we cannot be outside that ecosystem in Africa. So if proper policies or infrastructure is not put in place to take care of future shipping that are able to come to different parts of Africa, it'll be another setback compared to that setback that was there when the East Asia tiger economies took a very, very big leap forward. We are still to make that leap, plus this other leap, which is now coming up. So it's important, as they say, sometime to be at the table, because they say if you're not at the table, you're on the table, you're being served. So we are in Africa, you know, sometime not looking past what is tomorrow. Of course, instability, politics play a big part in some of the things that are missed out. But it's very important for organizations such as this that matters can be taken to those in power, and we advocate for the right things to be made for the benefit of the country today and for our children tomorrow. So in this case, I would hope and that leap would come one day. And I believe, you know, as I said, LNG, I've been working with this product now for quite a long time in every aspect. And I've seen what it can do. I can tell you, you know, in simple terms, you know, the power generation in Kenya is somewhere just under 2 gigawatts for whole of Kenya for a population of more than 40 million people. Just in Ras Laffan, we have power generation of 5 gigawatts. And the total population in the whole country, so there's a mention, is 2.5 million. In fact, the total generation of power in this country is just around 5 gigawatts. So you can see, with that energy, you can do a lot of things because it's cheaper, it's affordable, and it allows other things to grow. And at this point in time, the right decisions must be made. I can't, let's say, say this is the solution, but this is just observations from what I can see from outside looking in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Faisal. And we have another question here from one of the participants, and she's an engineer by profession. And her question is that if it is possible to use LNG fuel for propulsion of the autonomous vessels, since autonomy is key to removing ocean trade's infrastructural bottlenecks. Is it possible to use LNG fuel for propulsion of the autonomous vessels, since autonomy is key to removing ocean trade's infrastructural bottlenecks? Captain Faisal?
There's a lot of talk about autonomous vessels, and in fact, there is a lot of tests being made for different type of vessels. Like everything else as a human beings, we start doing things ourselves, and then we find it's more economical and sometimes safer when robots, machinery, whatever you want to call them, actually does the job. You could use, because autonomous vessels, when you have humans on a ship, of course, they need food, they need water, they need other facilities. While if there are no humankind on board, some of those things that you're carrying around on a ship is less. So the weight itself can be less and carry more cargo. And it is possible to use that sort of fuel because in the end, you want just to move the vessel from A to B. Of course, there's still a lot of challenges. In the end, a lot of these autonomous vessels, including what we call drones now, are controlled somewhere remotely. But when they have an interaction with a vessel that is manned by a human, there's more chances of incidents and accidents. But we see that is something coming more and more to the fore now, and we'll see a lot more of those vessels coming up. I have been involved in another discussion and study trying for actually port tugs which are autonomous. So it's coming. For sure it's coming. Yeah, and the fuel for that will probably be very different. I see more batteries on there. The technology for batteries is changing all the time. It's getting better. They can hold the power longer. You see the cars now. A lot of cars in Europe are electric vehicles, but you still need electricity, obviously, in the end to charge them. Okay. Recently, I think is Tesla became one of the most valuable companies because of the sales they're having of electric vehicles. So batteries are more likely to be on autonomous marine vessels than other type of hydrocarbons or fossil fuels. That's my observation. I may be wrong, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain. In the interest of time, we are a bit slightly beyond the time. I think we have one more question that from Florence Bett, and she asks, is it possible to use coal as an energy source? Perhaps this alludes to the very low temperatures, storage and transportation temperatures. I think, in my understanding, that would perhaps be the question. If the gas are cooled to those very low temperatures. I stand to be corrected, but that's my way of understanding the question. And she asks, is it possible to use coal as an energy source?
If I may attempt to answer it, I mean, maybe the title of our presentation maybe give a wrong
it alludes
impression.
to the storage temperatures and then to transportation temperatures.
Coal itself is actually just a state. As we know, it's just a state of something. It is not a fuel as such. If you have to create something cold, even when we but when we turn natural gas into LNG, we need to use refrigeration cycle to make it that cold. And in fact, most of the power during the production of LNG is actually there. It's not at the extraction phase, or is not even at the refining phase. It's when you're turning methane at that point as natural gas into LNG. I use a lot of power for that. Now, a lot of our power plants actually that's where the power goes. So the coal itself, or anything being cold, is not necessarily a fuel. Here we're talking about fuel, and I try to address, because it's a very wide subject. I was just trying to address about, number one, energy, because I'm standing in a nexus between energy, and on the other side, I'm also a mariner, and I'm looking at transportation, marine transportation specifically, not so much other type of transportation. In both cases, coal itself is not so much a fuel to actually create any energy or create propulsion in this case, because first you have to make the coal, whatever it is called. So to answer my sister Florence, maybe I misunderstood you, but I hope you can get the gist of my presentation itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain, for that. I believe you have very well clarified. Perhaps in my understanding as well, there may have been misunderstanding between coal and actually the real source of fuel here, which is a fossil fuel. And the cold temperatures are only storage and transportation temperatures, where that fuel is cooled to those very low temperatures. I think Madam Florence, our sister Florence, has understood quite clearly now as to what cold is, was meant to be in this presentation. Another question, Captain, from James Kituma, and he gives 3 types of shipping companies. One is a global shipping company without money constraints, and another one is a private local shipping company in Africa with money constraints, and a third one, a government-owned shipping company with bureaucracy issues. And he asks, which fuels would you advise on for the said companies individually for their long-term investment sustainably in future? And he says, assuming that these fuel changes requires investment and all companies' ownership. Quite a loaded question there, but I would say, tied to the subject of this webinar, the question would be as to the future of fuel for a global shipping company and for a company based in Africa and a government-owned company. And what is the way forward as to investments in these different technologies that are available? Would it be advisable to go to LNG powered ships, or perhaps to remain in the conventional fuel oil powered ships? I believe that would be the gist of the questions, but you may proceed to answer in the best way possible, Captain.
Thank you, Jess, for that question. First, I must advise you that there is no shipping company with no money constraints. I worked for quite some time as an officer and also in the office, operating company of Maersk company. Everyone knows who Maersk is. It's one of the largest container, and also we're very big in tankers as well. Money is always there. After all, they're in business, and business goes up and down. The big issue is, I think, the president was talking about, is about the fuel issue and how you make choices about fuel issues. The first issue is, there is any company needs to be in business, meaning they need to take their ships from A to B, different countries, and they have to comply to rules, regulations of where they're going. So they will be looking at what is acceptable in those areas of the trade they have targeted, and as to what is the least cost that they can actually do for their ships. As mentioned in my presentation, some of the existing ships can be converted, if you still want to, if they cannot comply to the ports they're going to burn other type of fuels. Or in the end, you will just maybe change your trade and find other places that you don't take your ships there. Those choices are really made with a mindset that in the end, first is a business. I need to be able to operate either locally or globally, and what should I need to comply to those jurisdictions that my ships are going to. And then the decisions about the fuel or even the manning or even the registration, is all coming from there. So very much, I think that covers any type of company you can think of. I hope that gives you an indication of how the mindset of ship owners and operators are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain. And I would wish to end the question and answer session at this point. We have slightly beyond our time limits for this webinar this evening. And I wish to take this opportunity to extend our vote of thanks to Captain Faisal, who's generously given us his time and prepared a very elaborate and very informative presentation to share with us this evening. And thank you so much. This has been a very unique webinar that takes us into other fields that have not yet been quite much discussed previously on this platform. It's been a cross-cutting topic. We've been able to hear quite a lot of shipping, energy, policies, and trade, and other cross-cutting issues that have been feeding into the topic this evening. So it's quite a loaded presentation, quite enlightening, and for that reason, it lends us to the question as to whether we should have a follow-up webinar, on particularly on the key takeaways that you ended with. Each one of those lends itself to an independent webinar in the future. So we would want at this point again to request you that, or rather to request you to consider follow-up webinars on each one of those key points that you pointed out at the very end of the webinar, the key takeaways. So this has been quite an enlightening, quite unique webinar. I thank you so much, Captain Faisal, on behalf of the MPK members that were able to join us this evening, and others that are following us on YouTube, and the rest who have extended their apologies for not being able to join us. I thank you so much on behalf of everyone. And well, for the participants, let's hopefully this presentation has generated an interest in the topic, and hopefully for some of the students following on YouTube, maybe for the benefit of Captain Faisal, I'd like you to know that we have a class from the Technical University of Mombasa that have turned this webinar this evening into a class, and they are attending and they're following up on YouTube, and their attendance is marked as a full lecture for this evening. And these are students of marine engineering at the Technical University of Mombasa. We have a class of maritime management as well, attending this as a full lecture on YouTube. And I'm very happy to inform you that quite some young minds are have been able to benefit from your presentation, and perhaps inspired them to venture into the LNG field. Thank you so much. And thanks again to all the participants. And I wish you all a very pleasant evening and perhaps a pleasant morning in other time zones. Asanteni sana. Maybe the final word, Captain Faisal, if any.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. It's really been a pleasure, and also, to be given this opportunity to share my experiences on different fields. As you mentioned, a lot of those questions are still very open. We are in very, very early days of how this whole climate change issue will turn out. And we should watch this space very, very closely. As I mentioned in one of my slides, that we in the shipping fraternity are really in the center of this storm, whether we want it or not, because we are involved in every aspect of it. And we should see and plan and also advocate to our own governments and other people in power to look at things a little bit more deeply, and then try to get ourselves ready for the next phase of evolution. I'm also very humble to hear that there is a whole class listening to this presentation. So karibuni sana, and anytime that you want me to share experience, I'm more than welcome to do so. And I'll leave it to you. You tell me what you may want to talk about, and maybe I may have to change it a little bit just to suit my own experience, and I'm ready for that. Thank you, and thanks everyone who's managed to join, whether directly on Zoom and also on YouTube. Your presence is really appreciated. Buena siku njema. Asanteni sana.
Captain, just a quick request here, and this presentation is recorded on Zoom. So we have a video recording of this presentation. Would you consent for students, other classes perhaps, to watch the video at a later date as part of their studies into the LNG topic?
I have no objection. I mean, as I mentioned first, as a disclaimer, that these are my own views and opinions, and not necessarily, they may not be hard facts, it's sort of, some of them are based on experiences. So more than, happy to share, and you may do so. I don't think I'm contravening anyone's, copyright in this.
No, it's not.
A lot of the information is just available out there, just on our experiences as well. No problem at all, Captain Suman.
Thank you very much. I'm sitting across from me is a lecturer who's the head of maritime training at the Technical University of Mombasa, and he would like to play this video at a future date, perhaps to some of the students who are taking other modules who may not have taken the class this evening. So I'm very sure he's happy by you giving your consent for the video to be played in some of his classes. Thank you so much, and have a blessed evening, Captain, and a blessed evening to all participants. Asanteni sana.
Asanteni. Have a great day.